Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Goldster PPG, Purpose, Passion, Grit. I'm so thrilled today to welcome Gary Hayes. And he has been doing a fascinating thing, creating an all-electric camper van. That's just it in a nutshell, but there's so much more to it than that. So, Gary, welcome to Goldster today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Delighted to be here.
So I was so intrigued when I heard about your company, but let's start with your career background and how you got into what you're doing now.
Right, where do I start? So it's quite a long background. I grew up just outside Glasgow, and I went to university in Glasgow and then left to live in the Netherlands. So one of my sort of weird things that I have is I speak fluent Dutch. Just I survived there being a student and buying all the drinks and all the joints. I had to get a job over there. So the easiest job was to be an English translator. So it made me fluent in Dutch, which is it's one of those languages where I thought it will never become useful except for in Holland and in South Africa. But there's possibly a link. We were looking to expand into Europe. But I studied developmental psychology at university, and which got me into health journalism. And so I moved to London in the early 90s and got into sort of addiction research and drug and alcohol misuse research, and became a journalist, became an editor. And it was just around at the end of the 90s when the internet was booming. So a lot of what I was doing was becoming more and more online. So I was I'm not a geek at all, but I was one of the sort of people at the early stages doing things. I don't know if you remember Dreamweaver and making websites.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me then that that what I was doing was going to become free. So,
Yes.
And so two things happened. One is it dawned on me that journalism was going to, or publishing was going to be something that people were expecting to get for free. And I became a dad in London. So, and I was working very hard. I was pushing some new journals. We'd launched an international journal, and I was working all the hours and earning very little particularly for London. And so myself and my wife bought a house. We had a kid, and we just weren't making ends meet. So I said to my publisher, I said, I had this idea for a campervan company, and was moving back to Scotland where my costs were cheaper. And so I had this idea, I'm going to do something that's to do with the wilderness, and I'm an outdoors guy, and I had this idea for these low-cost camper vans. I had a friend who was going to build the website for me for virtually nothing. So I said to my publisher, I said, look, I've got this other business idea. I says, you need to treble my wages. And he gave me his face kind of went white, and I says, but I'm going to let you off. You can double them. And funnily enough, he said no. So I headed off to Scotland, and I set up a camper van company at the foot of the Ochil Hills and in Plymouthshire. So that was my sort of trajectory. And not much to my surprise, but the camper van idea took off instantly, to the point where I had 18 vehicles on the road at any one time. And that was hire. That was just me hiring them. And there were four-wheel drive ones as well, so they were allowing people to go to the places that I wanted to go to. And I would go off in a car. I would invariably get it stuck in the mud or I was getting off the beaten track. So I got four-wheel drive vehicles. People might remember them, called Mazda Bongos. And I was known as Gary Bongo for years up here, because I knew them inside out. But interestingly, I got people were asking me if I designed interiors, we'd put interiors into them. And that's where the business really grew. I started designing interiors to camper vans. In fact, I designed my first interior when I was on jury duty at Alloa Sheriff Court. And the interesting thing about jury duty is you you're in a room full of strangers and you don't know anything about them, and you're not allowed to talk about the case. So literally, this conversation dried up in 15 minutes, and we're all just sitting each other looking there. And so I said to myself, I'm bringing, the squared paper you got at Techie Drawing at school.
Yeah.
I had a book from that. I think, I don't know, it was maybe I don't know where I got it from. I've got one of them in a cupboard somewhere. Brought it next day with a ruler, and I designed the interior. And that was it. That was the first one.
And with the other story, were they asking you what you were doing? And
yeah, well, I think everybody else did the same. So some people brought the Sudoku or the crossword or the knitting, and I brought my techie paper. So I designed very basic interior. I built it with a friend, and that's a bit that's really exploded, and it's where my passion's gone into. It's gone into thinking the space. It's a home space outdoors, taken outside, and then taken to a whole range of different areas. So it was all about getting, and in fact our strapline was exploring for all. I wanted to make it affordable, and I wanted everyone to access the beautiful countryside that I knew I was accessing as regularly as possible. And it took off, and it's still going.
so tell us, for those who may never ever have been in a camper van, what is it that you love about them, and what is it that makes them so perfect for traveling?
Well, I think it's all about accessing nature, and it's about getting away from it all, basically. So, and I love camping as well. In fact, I probably do more camping than I do camper vanning, and I love hill walking. We know that being outdoors is good for you. And I mean, I think it was just a couple of years ago there was GPs were prescribing people to go and be in nature. So that's it's something that's good for our health. And so for a lot of people, camping or taking just a tent into the wilderness is a bit much, and I've gone out just in my sleeping bag and just slept under the stars. I find it amazing, but it's not to everyone's taste. So what camper vanning does, it takes a bit of your home and it takes the luxury of home and takes that into the wilderness. And that's why I've always been interested in 4-wheel drive camper vans. So I started off with 4-wheel drive camper vans. I've designed a number of off-roader camper vans. Our Mitsubishi Terrain was one of the really popular ones. That was literally an off-road vehicle that took you into the middle of nowhere. So for me, it was about getting as many people who can into wilderness, because I for myself is how much it added to my life and how much health and energy it brings to me. So it's taking things like cooker, kitchen, bed, refrigeration into the wilderness. And the thing about a camper van is it's built into the vehicle. So rather than trailing it behind, it's built into the vehicle.
And then you can just sleep wherever. And in Scotland, I think it's easier in Scotland than in elsewhere in the UK, isn't it? You don't have quite such strict laws, is that right, about where you're allowed to stay for a night in a camper van? Am I correct about that? Yeah,
so you have the Land Reform Act, I think it's 2004, which was brought in by Holyrood. There's an interesting agreement that was originally agreed on the Letter U estate. It was a Dutch guy that bought this massive estate off the west coast of Scotland. I think it was one of the biggest estates in Scotland. And this guy was a Dutch multimillionaire that bought this estate. And one of the first things he did when he got there is he put a fence around the estate and blocking off some seriously beautiful mountains.
Yeah.
And pass. And so everybody was up in arms. And to this guy's credit, he listened. And what they did is they created what was called the Letter U Accord. And what that did was it was a very practical guide to land use. And basically what it said was that provided you look after the land, you don't damage it, you don't infringe on activities such as deer stalking or farming, it's not within someone's backyard, it's not invading someone's privacy, you've got a right to roam. So that got adopted. It formed the basis of the Land Reform Act 2004 that Scotland brought in, which basically gave everyone the right to roam, provided these things were sort of respected. Interestingly, it doesn't apply to motorised vehicles, so you can do it on your bike or a canoe, but if you stick a motor on your canoe, like a motorised boat or a camper van, that doesn't apply.
Right.
But there's also there's the Road Traffic Act now. It's 1993 or something. It was the Road Traffic Act, and this is UK wide, which allows you to overnight, so basically camp, stop within 13 feet of any public road, provided there's not a sign or a rule that says you can't. So this is really interesting. So, and this applies in England too. So if you go somewhere and there's a space that's off the road, and it doesn't have a sign that says you can't camp here overnight, you can camp here overnight.
Right. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
You're listening there. You are. Get a new camper van, preferably an electric one, and head out 13 feet of a public highway. Did you say?
Within 13 feet either side of a public highway, you've got the right to park your car and to stay in it overnight.
Oh, excellent. So what is your target audience? Or actually, tell us about the product. Tell us about this completely electric. Is it the first fully zero emissions recreational vehicle? Is that the correct description?
What it is, I'll take you back a little bit because there's a bit of a story to getting there. So we launched in 2016 the world's first hybrid camper van, and what we did there is we repurposed large hybrid vehicles, and now they were only available, and they still are only available in Japan and Toyota. I mean, it's interesting is that Toyota have been mass producing hybrid vehicles since 1998. So the Japanese are at least a decade ahead of us in terms of vehicle technology. So we brought over, which was a Toyota Alphard hybrid, and spent a year and a half designing it into a camper van. That means swiveling front seats, cooking using the hybrid battery. So we introduced an induction hob, and a patented Omni-Slide cooker, which is a cooker that can cook outside and inside, microwave oven, you name it. You can put in a coffee maker, toaster, whatever. So we introduced this back in 2016, and this was part of my drive to kind of leave no trace. And what I was acutely aware of is back in the around about 2010 was that what we were doing was converting diesel vehicles with diesel heaters going into area beauty spots, beautiful clean areas, and spewing out all these gases, as well as other things, things like your rubbish and sewage if you're using a toilet. So we were looking at reducing the impact. So we started looking at that. So 2014, we launched it in 2016, and what we found out in 2016 was that there was a big market for it. So it instantly within about 3 months, it became our big seller. So it ended up becoming 75% of our sales. And we knew then that there was a market for it, and we could make money out of it, and we could develop it. So we then got quite a lot of support from Scottish Enterprise and from the UK government, and also from our local council, in helping us do more and more R&D. So we started looking at renewable energy. We started looking at how we can incorporate solar panels, wind generation, also looking at heating. So we were looking at capturing heat from the combustion engine so we could release it at night time. One of the things that we looked at as well was why do you wait when you get to the campsite to cook when you've got all this renewable energy getting captured by the vehicle when it's driving, in what's called regenerative braking. So we put in a slow cooker so you could cook while driving. So it's capturing that energy, cooking while you're driving, and then whatever's ready, your stew, when you get those ready when you get to your destination. So we started rethinking the whole concept of using energy, when you're using energy, and what you're using the camper van for. And we can talk a little bit later about how that can go even further, the way technology is going. So it was pretty obvious that we knew back then that we needed to get to zero emissions, and we've been striving from that since pretty much 2017, when we realised that, hey, we're onto something here. So we've spent, including grant money, we've spent over $1.5 million worth of R&D on these kind of technologies. Because it wasn't just looking at the drivetrain, which is the vehicle. So it's about getting a good electric vehicle, but also the stuff that we do inside. So if you go on holiday now, if you get a caravan or a motorhome, it'll either be heated by diesel or it'll be deheated by butane, propane gas, and they're all carbon fuels, and they're all contributing to the CO2 emissions and the greenhouse gases. So we're looking at refrigeration, cooking, and heating. Now we set ourselves back in about 2020. We set ourselves the goal of getting a completely zero emissions vehicle by 2025, and just through sheer hard work, with our guys, we launched a fully zero emissions camper van this year. And so we're based upon a Toyota ProAce electric vehicle, and we've developed zero emissions heating. We've got a heated bed. We've got electric.
Sounds like a great idea for camp.
Oh man, when we launched it at the show, we launched it at the NEC show in February, the Camper Caravan show in February. I knew, and you just think, well, electric bed, that's the obvious thing to do. You just don't realise that when you mention to people, was it how many eyes lit up?
Yeah.
Heated bed. And we were also looking at things like infrared heating, heated floors. So heating the individual rather than trying to heat this big space, which obviously with diesel heaters, we've got loads of diesel and it's cheap. So we launched. So it's not the world's first electric camper van. They've been around for a while, but it's the world's first fully zero emissions electric camper van, and that includes the interior, such as the heating and the cooking and the refrigeration. And we did.
Most people don't think about. I mean, it's never occurred to me before. You think about, what you're using. Are you using electricity? Are you using petrol or diesel to fire a car or a camper van? But it's just never ever thought that how many emissions come from things that happen inside.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So, and what's interesting is like there are these diesel heaters which are ubiquitous across the camper van world. They're not regulated at all. They don't have any catalytic converters in them, and these camper vans are literally parked next to tents and are spewing out these diesel fumes night and day. So yeah, it's about rethinking everything, and that's what we see our role as being designers, and we're passionate about not just designing really comfortable and fun and exciting camper vans, but making them ecologically sound as well.
Yeah, brilliant. We've just had a question. Are there any photos? So just to say to everybody who is here, I've just put a link in the chat, and for anybody who is listening at a later date, the link is campervanco.com. Okay,
that's us.
Campervan then co.com. And so tell us about this. Talk us through as if you are looking at a photo, because obviously people who are listening, give us an idea about what your camper vans include.
So our camper van has, on the one hand, it's a standard camper van. So what we used is what's called a side conversion idea, and basically it's really simple. Is that you've got the units go down one side behind the driver, and then the space that's left to the side of that is a living space, and it's where a bed goes, and the bed is what's called a rock and roll bed, and it's basically a bed that is a seat and then it folds down into a bed, and there's a simple action like that. The two front seats will swivel. There's there's one or more tables for you to play cards, eat, just have your drinks on, and then there's storage. There's a fridge. There's a cooker. In our one, there's loads of plugs, so you can plug in things like coffee maker, whatever you want to cook. There's lights, and then there's heating, and for us, there's the heated bed. So when you typically, if you open, and there's also a roof, so we do an elevated roof. So, and what that does is it cut a big bloody hole in the top, and we stick a roof on it, and it elevates up. So there's another bed in the roof. So it's four berth, so they can seat. Well, interestingly, our one can seat up to 7.
Right.
And now, one of the key things of electric vehicles and to the buyer, the key considerations are, what's the range? So, and I'm surprised you've not asked that question. Usually when we say we've got an electric camper van, it's the first question, what's the range? How long does it take to charge? And in terms of a camper van, what's the berth? So now, one of the things that's really important in electric vehicle land is a thing called light weighting. It's an actual word. It's an actual thing. And so what we have been doing over the last few years is spending a lot of time and energy into looking at everything we do and making it lighter. So one of the things that we looked at is what's the easiest way to make the vehicle itself lighter is to be able to just take stuff out.
Mhm.
So we designed it so that the units are modular. So the key, there's one unit that's got the sink and it's got the cupboards in it, and it's also got a little toilet in it as well. And that can be and a cooker on it as well. And so that can be lifted out, and it can also be put into your awning, which is your side tent. So you can use it as a sort of
Brilliant.
cooking island in your awning. And we give you a little extension cable so you can have it and you can picnic outside, which we think is really important. But now, interestingly, this is looking at your use of it. What we typically, if you've got a camper van, is a lot of people will sit on their drive for, 10 months, 9 months out of the year. And for us, that's a massive waste of resource. All that energy's been put into building this camper van, and it's going to be sitting there doing nothing. Meanwhile, you're probably driving about every day in your diesel, your lovely diesel BMW or whatever. So we've designed it so that it can be your everyday car. And so one of the key questions for people is when using it as an everyday car, is it, can I use it for my family? So what we've done is by designing it to be modular, you can take the units out, but you can click in extra seats.
Well,
So go from a 4-seater and you can click in an extra 3 seats. So it can be a 7-seater minibus.
Yeah.
And so what that allows you to do is it allows you to use your vehicle every day, taking advantage, obviously, of the low emissions side of it, or the zero emission side of it, because it's an electric vehicle. So we've also designed in lightweighting. We're looking at a lightweight bed, for example. We're currently designing a lighter bed that can clip in or out. So you can also take the bed out as well. So you can also use it as a van.
Mhm.
So what we are looking at with this vehicle is we're looking at making it not just a recreational vehicle, but basically your everyday vehicles. So it's like a super multi-purpose vehicle.
Mhm.
So and we've designed it so that we're trying to think of what do you use it for. And I think there's extensions to that. I think as we're moving forward into sort of autonomous vehicles are going to be self-driving. And by all intents and purposes, once they become self-driving, the vehicles are by definition going to be a leisure or recreational vehicle. So that's where we think the future of RVs is. So we are already thinking about what is the role of this vehicle going to be, or the roles going to be in your life. And that's the things that we are looking at.
Great. God, it all sounds so amazing. We've already had a question saying, can you hire it?
We are not a hire company ourselves, but there's lots of companies that are currently interested in it, and we're waiting for the market to see the joys and the benefits of going electric. Currently, the hire market is still completely dominated by diesel,
Right.
but that is changing. And we are currently just now speaking to quite a few rental companies up and down the UK who are looking to order from us for next seasons. So hopefully, there'll be companies up and down the UK that you can hire our electric vehicle from.
Brilliant. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Comments saying they've never been in a camper van, but now they really, really want to.
Well, that's great.
So you talked about how your Dutch might come in useful. So tell us about your plans for kind of looking beyond the UK.
Yeah, so our plans are, we're based in central Scotland, and most of our sales are down south, particularly the southeast, sort of Birmingham south. And we currently have a partner down there called Carefree Campers, who they are based in Hemel Hempstead. So we're expanding sales there, but we get daily inquiries from 2 areas. We get daily inquiries from European Union, and we also get a lot of inquiries from the States, particularly California.
Right.
Is it Oregon? Is it?
Oregon is very much that life.
Very right on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a gorgeous place and an amazing place to go camping as well, because it's just such a beautiful.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So we get about 4 emails a day just saying, I'm like, your camper vans are so neat, and we want to get stuff over there. So the American market is a difficult market to penetrate, but we are currently in discussions with the Flemish government, which is Belgium, to open up a depot there for us to start selling left-hand drive versions of this vehicle, and also we've also got a Ford electric vehicle coming through. We're also official converters for Ford. Ford are launching their full electric Transit Custom next year, and we're also currently taking orders for. They do a hybrid version of it as well, which has been out for a while, and we launched that a year ago, which Ford's Transit Custom Hybrid. Recognizing that some people are for the jump to fully electric is a bit too far, so we recognize that there's a gap in the market too for a similar type vehicle, but with a hybrid option. And there's lots of challenges which you sort of need to be overcome, which hybrid kind of alleviates. So in terms of opening up a branch, we're currently looking at opening a branch up in probably either Bruges or Ghent, where they speak Dutch. So that'll be finally become useful.
Reputation is ever wasted.
Yeah, totally.
So I think, as you mentioned, that people are sometimes a bit reluctant to go fully electric. They want hybrid. And I guess that's because the infrastructure people fear isn't there. Do you think it's getting better? Do you think that driving an electric vehicle now within the UK is becoming much more possible because more electricity charging points and things are being put in? Or do you think there's still a long way to go?
With both.
Yeah.
So it's getting better. And I've been driving an electric vehicle since November, and I'm up and down the country doing business. And there's regional differences. Scotland, the Scottish government's been pretty proactive in setting up charging stations, and for quite a while charging was free in most parts of Scotland. There's a Charge Point Scotland is the initiative that the Scottish government set up. The council started charging their own rates from December and April, some in April this year. And it ranges from 15 pence a kilowatt hour up to 50 pence. So there's quite a bit of a difference. Where I live in Fife, it's 15 pence kilowatt hour, which is about half what you pay at home.
Right.
There's no such thing in England, but what I've noticed travelling in England with the charging points is that there's just increasingly more appearing, and they're becoming increasingly more reliable. And there's BP and Shell and all these. So if you look at it from a purely business point of view, is if you look at all these petrochemical companies, they all know that very soon people are not going to be putting fuel in their tank. And so they've got this real estate, and what they're going to do with this real estate is that they have to be installing charging points. And so I've got a contact in Shell, and they're saying that this year alone they are looking at installing 28,000 charging points throughout the UK this year alone, so within the next year. So it's all happening. It's getting better and better. Right now it's at that kind of funny phase where there's about 10, that's as you guess, 10 different companies, maybe more, 15 different companies doing different types of chargers, all with a different app and all with a different way to do it.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So it's a bit like that, and it's a bit sort of VHS beta. It's like what charger thing are you going to use? And yeah.
Worrying. God, that's so frustrating. They're not all using the same thing.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. What's it like elsewhere in Europe? If you're traveling around, are there certain countries that really stand out as being good for electric vehicles and some that are quite far behind?
Yeah, again, differences throughout Europe. I think the standout is Scandinavia. Norway is the one where currently right now 98% of new vehicle sales are electric.
Wow.
And it's 99.6% in Oslo, in the capital. So they have used a sort of multitude of things. It's a stick in the carrot approach to getting people to switch over. There's incentives to get rid of your old car, and there's incentives to use electric, and they've sorted out the charging grid. So, but yeah, there's definite challenges to people switching. Some people just don't have access to a charging point outside their house. For example, people who live in a flat in cities, or some people who live down just wherever they're at, there's not a chance to park the car outside their house, for example, one of those things. So it, so there's challenges that need to be overcome. That ways around that are simply is that you find a place to charge en route, such as at work or at the shops or at, when you go into the city centre. I mean, where things are going to go just now is parking lots are going to have charging. They already do in Glasgow, for example, and I've been to them in London. You go and charge a car, and you go park your car, and charge it at the same time. So we're getting there. I think there's also I think we're experiencing there's a thing called a Gartner sort of cycle where new technology kind of peaks and it goes into a trough and then it kind of comes up and it stabilizes. And I think just now we've had the peak. We're now going through the bit where people are the reality is starting to kick in, where the hype is overtaken by the reality, and we have a lot of people sort of resistant to change. Obviously, we're all a bit conservative, don't like change. But I think there's also people are starting to say, "Oh, well, it's not as good as you said it was," which is actually right, because there are challenges to overcome. But what happens is that people then start to use the product more efficiently and more effectively, and we start to get into a stabilized effect. So I think just now we're getting a bit of a dip, and that's going to come back up. And so there's lots of resistance now to sort of switching over to electric vehicles. Some of it justified, some of it not. But the definite trend is towards us doing that switch.
Great. And I mean, we've been hearing people talk about we need to switch over to electric for such a long time now. And then there seems to be this kind of strange backlash at the moment. Do you ever feel quite despairing about people not caring enough about emissions? Why should we be caring?
I think it's frustration rather than despairing. So we've been sort of taking our products to the market for a while, and we are by no means one of the big players. And I've got friends who are in this sustainability area and who have been working in this for 20 years. Getting behavioural change is a big problem, and it's bigger than us as a business. I think as a sort of people, as the British people, I think we're quite conservative with a small c, and I think we don't like. I don't think the British people like being told what to do. If I may be so bold, and I think maybe Brexit is one of those things where where people perceive we're being told what to do elsewhere, and we don't like it. So I think we've definitely experienced when we've taken our low emissions or hybrids and our electric products to exhibitions, we've literally had people come up to us and say, "Oh, it's never going to happen," or they're never going to ban them, that kind of thing. And even now, I mean, I think I saw the Daily Mail when I was doing my shopping as to the other day there, and the Daily Mail saying there pressures on the government to extend the 2030 ban on combustion engines, and I think there's just there's a, and it's not just restricted to us. It's happening across. Is that people they'll try and push other things rather than change their behaviour, and the government will stick to the guns. I'm hoping, particularly if we get a new government coming in with Labour, I don't think that they will be rowing back on any of the commitments. So I think it's just people. I think there's also cost as well. I think people are looking at their diesel vehicle and they're saying, well, I'm going to have to pay 40 grand for a Tesla, and that kind of thing. So so there's there needs to be a sort of coordinated effect. There needs to be support from the government. There needs to be information. There needs to be things helping people over the transition.
There really does. And do you think that the car manufacturers are going to start doing that? Are they going to start creating electric cars that are far more affordable?
Yes, they are.
Be very unaffordable at the moment.
Yeah, and that's happening across the board. I was at a conference organised by the FT, the Financial Times, just in April, and all the big manufacturers were there. Even Ferrari were there, and they were saying that they are developing an electric supercar. And
you don't affordable that one then?
No, absolutely. what was really interesting, what the chairman was there, and he was saying one of the things, for example, with Ferrari is that one of the trademark or one of the things that sells a Ferrari is the noise.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, just like the roar of the engine.
Because it's not annoying at all.
Yeah, not when you're sitting inside and just showing off your Ferrari to your 20-year-old girlfriend. So what he was saying is that they're actually building into their electric design a unique Ferrari noise, and it's not fake. So who knows? But all the manufacturers are all looking at efficiencies of scale. They're looking at battery technology. They're looking at range. So there's, as you would expect, there's a whole load of interesting technological developments happening right now. And one of the big announcements just in the last few weeks has been Toyota. I don't know if you picked up on it, but Toyota, they're not the only ones working on it, but they are making some big moves in what's called solid state batteries. And they're lithium batteries, but what they're doing is rather than having sort of fluid inside them, which can be combustible or at least makes them dangerous, they're getting rid of the liquids part of it and putting in solid state parts of it, which are making them lighter, more safer, and also longer range. And now they're saying that they're hoping they can get out around about 700 to 800 miles range as opposed to 300 now in some vehicles.
That's incredible. So is that probably a Toyota thing, or is this across the board, do you think?
Well, obviously Toyota have spent probably billions in developing this, so they'll be launching it and patenting some of it. But there are other companies. Samsung have been looking at solid state batteries for a while. There's other things as well. There's sodium ion batteries which are being talked about, and lithium sulfur batteries. So there's lots of things that are being looked at that are going to improve the things that matter, which is weight and range. And we know that where we need to get a range that's similar to a car, which is around about 300 to 600 miles and can charge really quickly. And the thing with these lithium solid state batteries is that Toyota are saying they can charge in 10 minutes.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
And are they the ones that charge as you're driving as well? Is that the...
Well, all electric cars do.
Right. Okay.
They've got what's called regenerative braking. So when you hit the brakes, what you're doing is the motor goes in reverse. So it pushes the electrons back into the battery.
Right.
Which is one of the things that makes electric vehicles, because they put on average about 20%, 22% of energy back into the vehicle. So it makes them, as you're using them, it makes them much more efficient than say a combustion engine, like 3 times more efficient.
So you talked earlier about the scaremongering. The government are going to have to change their targets, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about the recent, there's been certain elements of the press who've suddenly decided that all car parks are going to collapse because it's too heavy. Tell us what you think about this, and what is leading this? Is it the kind of petrol and diesel car manufacturers, or what is it that's leading this kind of scaremongering?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of factors in play here, and I think that we've already talked about just our human resistance to change. There's cost. There's the British press, which to sell papers, it needs to create a controversy. Let's not forget that. So and a lot of what's in the press today is wants you to click on something, so it's going to make an outlandish statement. So one of the statements that's getting a lot of clicks just now is what we've been told is not true. And this is back to what I was saying to you in terms of this Gartner sort of hype cycle. Is it what's happening just now? There's lots of facts which are coming out, which people are tarnishing what we see as this sort of bright, shiny thing of electric vehicles, and people are starting to reassess. So that'll balance out. It generally does with technology. I think one of the big factors in current vehicle or the current vehicle market is that we have vehicles which were designed for combustion engines, which were designed to have a steel frame and hundreds of moving parts. And so to get those economies of scale, to get vehicles cheap enough, we have to build huge factories to build these vehicles. So companies like Volkswagen and less so Ford, who have been moving. That it's not just our behaviour that needs to change, but the industry has to physically change. And so, I don't know if you've been to there's where Volkswagens are made in Germany. The plant there is huge. I mean, it's the size of a city.
Wow.
And they're very proud to take you there. If you're ever in Germany, I recommend going there. It's an eye opener. But those types of economies of scale are not required anymore,
right,
for electric vehicles, and that's because it's just electric motors. So a lot of them are just components. You're just assembling components. So factories are going to become smaller. So the technology is going to become more efficient, but the factories that build them are going to become smaller. So you've got people like Volkswagen saying, how are we going to pay for this? So there's a vested interest in some of these companies, petrochemical companies as well, in preventing behaviour change. So I think there's a multifaceted effect, and then there's climate change denial as well, which I don't think we'll go into that one. Well, I'm not an expert in that area, so we know that is a factor as well, and I think that's and are we in a period where conspiracy theories are just everywhere?
It does seem that way. I mean, I just find it absolutely incredible. Sometimes I look at what people have written on social media and think, really? Are we not supposed to be the most highly educated that human race has ever been?
No. Well, it's clickbait, isn't it? If we can say something really sort of outrageous, people will click on it and then they'll disappear down the rabbit hole. And I think that's the rabbit hole. I think we like rabbit holes. I think a lot of us.
Well, now there's a word on your website that I'd never heard of before. Talking of education, we all know about hybrid now. What is tribrid?
All right. Tribrid. So we coined that phrase back in 2016. So what we did is, with your hybrid vehicle, you've still got a petrol part of the vehicle, and so what we looked at is how do we make that petrol part cleaner, and so we built into an LPG fuel system, or auto gas, LPG, liquid petroleum gas. So basically what it is, it's gas that's taken largely out of North Sea. The Dutch produce it. We get it out of the North Sea. It's still a fossil fuel. It's a bit cleaner to extract, and the emissions from it are cleaner. So when if you're driving behind an LPG vehicle, it smells like your gas fire or your boiler. Is that?
Yeah.
Crucially, it's half the price. So LPG is right now about 80 pence a litre, compared to, or 70 pence compared to £1.40. So, and that became really popular. So we've stopped doing that now, and primarily just because it's, as a thing, it's disappearing. It's very difficult to get. Well, not very difficult. It's just there's very few garages selling it.
Right.
I was driving an LPG car since 2011. So I knew where all the so if you're driving past, it was like, right, children, we're going in there, because I knew that's where the LPG garage was. And they would get an ice lolly and an ice cream and a packet of crisps, and I was filling my tank up. So it was a way of making it cheaper and cleaner to drive.
Yeah. Okay, so you have, I think, convinced a lot of people that they should not only be driving electric, they should be going in a camper van. So going back to the basics for camper van is, what are your tips for people who have never, ever even thought about going in a camper van before? Why should they go now?
Well, it's as I say, it's a way of getting yourself and your family, or just yourself, off into nature. And there's some wonderful campsites out there. There's some wonderful free parking spots you can go. And the best thing in the world, I think, is you wake up in the morning, you pull back those curtains, and you've got that view. And I'm heading off this weekend with my wife in our electric camper van, and we're heading up to the north coast. So we're going to open up the curtains on a beach, basically, and so you can't whack it. Your view changes every day. So you're right, let's go somewhere else. You can follow the good weather as well.
That's important.
It's cheap, to go off. I mean, once you buy your camper van, you can, certainly with our hybrid camper van and our electric camper van, it can be your everyday car. So it's a really inexpensive, and for us, a clean way to go and experience. You can even go into the city. I sometimes, if I'm going in through to Edinburgh, I'll take a camper van through and park in the free parking spots in Edinburgh, so that I don't have to drive home at night when I've been out enjoying the fun.
I have a friend who does exactly that. If he goes out for the night, he takes the camper van, and then he doesn't have to worry about getting home. He sleeps in the camper van and drives when he's. I mean, honestly, it's that's a great idea. And I believe you have a dog that you're going to be taking as well.
Yeah, so it'll take my little Labrador Hira, so she'll come with us as well. She absolutely loves it.
And as those of us who have dogs know, it is incredibly hard to travel with dogs. There's not that many friendly hotels or places to go. So that's a huge bonus, isn't it, for people who...
Yeah, well, we've loads of our customers it's quite interesting sort of the customers that we get a lot of photographers, and it's their studio is outside, so we've designed the camper van around their sort of their photography, such as a safe cupboard so they can lock their very expensive equipment in. Dog owners, so we've made it we can put eyelets on the floor so they can put dog cages in or a place to lash the dog. And I think my favorite sort of customers are I don't think they'll get me into trouble is women whose kids have left, and either their husbands have left, or they've left their husbands, or they've just been left on the couch watching the telly, and they've just got this lease of life, and they've got a bit of money, and they're saying, I've been dreaming about this all my life, is that I'm going to get a camper van, I'm going to go off. And they're the best customers of all because they're just so enthusiastic, and they're very open-minded, I think, as well. So it's like they're coming to sort of learn about what we've got to offer, and we get some of our best ideas from those kind of customers. It's great.
And have you noticed? Because I've really noticed more people interested. I mean, me personally, I did a bit of camper vanning when I've been backpacking, but it's never been my thing. And then after lockdown, I just suddenly thought, I wish I had a camper van. I could have gone and stayed anywhere in my own space. And particularly now I have dogs. It's something that I've been thinking about more. Have you noticed that since the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been huge. Yeah, we had 11 times the amount of inquiries than we normally do when lockdown finished. So there was a peak, and we were very busy. It's slowed down. In fact, I was looking at figures a few weeks ago, and there was 16,000 new camper vans bought after lockdown. It's typically around about 11,000, so there was an extra 5,000. So what we're saying that is, it was almost 50% new purchases after lockdown, and then it's kind of leveled out. And then what's happened is that re-registrations of used vehicles have gone up. So what's happened is there's a lot of people that went out and said, right, I'm getting a camper van. They went and got it. They've probably used it twice, and it sat on the drive, and they've realised they're skint, and then they went and sold it. So the second-hand car market or camper van market's kind of taken. So, but it's still really strong. Staycationing is still a big thing, which has got its upsides and its downsides. So one of the things that, particularly in rural parts of Scotland, have been experiencing is just they got inundated by campers, and so there was camper vans parking in passing places. I don't know if you know them on the single track roads. There's passing places to let people get past, which causes real problems if you're parking in the parking space. People leaving rubbish, sometimes just leaving effluent. So there's been a bit of a backlash with some rural communities, the ones that I know of in Scotland, and so we're, as an industry, we're trying to clean that up. We're trying to get people to have a code, and there's also been a campaign to people for local councils to create facilities for these camper vans to go to, because some communities were saying, stop them coming, and it's like, well, that A is not going to happen, and B, it's a form of income for you guys as tourism. Tourism is a big part of the rural community, so they're creating these things called airs where people can take their camper vans, they can, for a small fee, camp there, and they can get rid of the rubbish. So that again, it's back to leaving no trace, getting out there and seeing it, but doing it responsibly. So we speak to all our customers and try and speak to them about how they're using their vehicle.
Exactly the same issues happened in New Zealand as have been happening.
Yes.
And they had to change the law, which is really, really sad that people don't have quite as much freedom for camping in New Zealand because people really abused that freedom. And it's deeply frustrating, isn't it, when you think people are getting out into the countryside and loving being in the countryside and then ruining the countryside. It's a very type of behaviour. But
yeah, it's heartbreaking when you see that. It really upsets me when I'm out and about and I see that happening. That's education.
Absolutely. So much of it is education. Okay, so you're setting out this weekend. Now you are a seasoned camper vanner. What is on your essential checklist that people might not think when they're going on any other holiday? What do you have to take that no first-time camper van user should forget?
Well, I think the thing is what not to take. I think when people go, having done so many hires, you would get, back in the day when I was doing hires, you get people arriving with, suitcases of stuff. So take as little as you can. You wouldn't need, you wouldn't need as many clothes as you think you need. So keep that to a minimum. So the things that you should have in your camper van would be pots and pans, cutlery and plates, and easy to cook food. I think that's the thing to take. So don't be taking potatoes and take some easy cooked rice and stuff like that, so you can cook quickly. And one of the things that is a real tip for people is that on the camper van beds is when they go down. Now the interesting thing about the rock and roll beds, it's a seat that goes down to a bed. It has to be firm enough for it to function as a seat, which means that the foam is quite firm. So one of the things to take with you going to a camper van is get a really nice topper.
Ready?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gary. It has been an absolute joy talking to you, and
my pleasure.
Really excited about this going forward. I hope that all your plans for the future come together really, really well. Already had a comment in the chat that says, very inspiring. I really like the way that you think. So I think you've inspired a lot of people today. This continues to inspire people. I'm just going to tell people very briefly what is coming up on Goldster. So this week on Inside Story in the Book Club, you've got Humphrey with you, and he is talking to author Barbara Berger on Thursday, and her book is Healthy Models for Relationships. And then on Friday, he is back again with Natalie Playmondon-Thomas, and she is talking about Think Yourself Confident. I will be back next week on the Goldster Book Club talking to James Clark, who's got a new book out about Brigitte Bardot. And then on the 21st of July, I'm talking to novelist Catherine Quarmby about her brand new novel, which is a historic novel actually based on a true story called The Low Road. Really fascinating, quite an amazing story that she uncovered and then fictionalized much of it. So please do keep with us, and Rosie will be back with you next Tuesday for PPG. Great to talk to you, Gary. And
thank you, Lucinda.
Good luck with everything you're doing. Have a great
so much.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.